The GYCC 22-23 EUMSEONG Town Hall meeting will start with each team's presentations and include sharing and listening to the thoughts of our distinguished guests and our global youth.
First, each team will present on the 6 topics of bioeconomy, illegal logging, climate technology, desertification, forest biodiversity, and water quality. These teams have held many discussions and listened to expert lectures online to finally create an action model to combat deforestation's effect. At this town hall meeting will be the first offline presentation of the action model. We believe it will be a very meaningful presentation.
Let us now hear from the GYCC participants about each of the 6 teams' action models based on the main subtopics of deforestation. First of all, we will hear from Team 1 present on the forest-based bioeconomy. Team 1 presenter, Velina Engipi, please come to the stage.
Respected distinguished guests and my dear fellow friends, my topic is sustainable. Okay, sir. Our topic is sustainable forest-based bioeconomy, and our region is focused on South Asia and Central Asia. Over the years, time and again, researchers and experts in the field have amplified that sustainable development is a necessary precondition for a successful forest-based bioeconomy. But we live in a world where greed overpowers the life of nature, and therefore, we have adopted to a traditional linear economy model of living where there is an endless cycle of production and consumption without any concern for ecological footprints. And therefore, all of this becomes a cost of resource exhaustion that has multiple phases, and in the process, all of these problems transitioned into a domino effect on the entire ecosystem. Our goal is to enhance knowledge for creating sustainable forest-based bioeconomy through increasing access to information. Our short-term and immediate goal is to create an e-magazine, which we will focus on in this action plan. Our mid-term goals are to create information and communication materials that we collected for the magazine using various local languages to reach out to the rural communities. This could be in the form of street plays, community radio, flyers, etc., using all local friendly languages. This will be converted to educational materials that are children-friendly to be used in local schools. And then for our longer term, we have the indigenous communities that have been coexisting with the nature for generations. So in the long term, this website will also create a market linkage where they can sell their products. And we will also put forward policy recommendations that are inclusive and use holistic approach that involves all stakeholders in every stage of the decision-making process. We'd also be creating youth networks where all the like-minded youths can come together like we are right now, and together we can exchange dialogues and good practices from this region. This is our objectives, and the target audience is very clear because sustainability in general is a very complex web of problems, especially in developing countries. And therefore, our team also wanted to move a little bit away from the niche target and focus especially on building the bridge between the education system, general public, especially youth and children, and most importantly, the forest communities who are directly impacted so that no one is left behind in the process. This is our sample e-magazine we have been working on. So when we researched about this particular topic, one thing we found out that there was no common platform where people could find information and understand this in depth. Of course, there were research papers and articles, but for people who didn't understand the topic, it was all rocket science. So we wanted to create a common platform where everybody could read, understand, and process it clearly, where there is no rocket science involved, and it is all in layman's term. So the magazine will have different sections, and where we will try our best to cover all bases that come under the main topic, incorporating all industries and stakeholders, and involve various good practices that we can take back to our countries. We also want to use this to initiate a knowledge-sharing initiative for youths with the hope that they can be agents of change and create a difference in our own communities, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the informative presentation on Action Plan. Hope this idea to be successfully implemented and support forest bioeconomy. Thank you again for opening an Action Plan presentation.
Next, we will hear from Team 2 on their presentation on the topic illegal logging. Team 2 presenter Diego Areola Fernandez, please come to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, perfect. Distinguished guests, my name is Diego. I'm from Mexico, and we are focusing on illegal logging in Latin America, Africa, and Europe, since most of our team members are from these regions in the world. So we found some similarities, we found differences, so we want to implement a comprehensive international tracking system for timber, which I'm going to talk about more in just a few more minutes. But first of all, the sub-regions that we focused on are Brazil, Honduras, Colombia, and Gabon in Central Africa, and the European Union. We found that there is a direct connection between Gabon exporting timber and the European Union importing it, and there are indirect relationships between Brazil, Honduras, and Colombia, and we're also using a Colombia policy called the Intersectoral Pact for Legal Timber, supported by FAO in the European Union as a reference for our policy. Okay, talking about the problem, illegal logging. There are two types of logging, small scale and large scale. And this is just like the ends of the spectrum. Small scale logging can sometimes be sustainable, a sustainable practice by small communities, but large scale logging, even being legal, is often not sustainable. It contributes to climate change, to loss of biodiversity, because most companies, large companies, do not take the proper approaches to ensure that their processes are sustainable. And on top of that, if we add illegal logging, we're also talking about economic losses for the government and adding to corruption, organized crime, and it involves multiple stakeholders from policymakers and government officials to business owners and the public sector with climate change and human rights crisis. So that's the problem, and in Latin America and Europe specifically, in Latin America we have the drug dealing problem in which cartels use land and deforest in order to use that land, and there's a lot of corruption with politicians. In Europe they use it for clandestine and informal, for-profit, large corporations. And here are some pictures of deforestation, and that's okay. The goal, provide policy and business solutions. Because there are differences, we know that this policy has to be specific to each country's weaknesses and strengths. So for example, in Brazil, since 2019, since the current administration took office, we've noticed that only 2% of illegal logging alerts have been taken into account, and action has been taken only on 2%. So that's where the problem of government accountability comes into account, and that's where we want to innovate. We want the public and NGOs and the civil society to take more action, multilateral organizations to also take more action and enforce that illegal logging activities are taken into account and are taking action against them. That's where, I'm going to just skip this time-wise, we want to introduce international comprehensive tracking system consisting on an app, a website, also with agencies and a hotline for government in the country A, where timber is extracted and exported to country B, to be in both countries in order to keep track, like a certification. We made this analogy to a human that needs a passport to go to other countries. We want to establish something similar, like a certificate for each timber and timber products derived, to keep track of where they come from. They're all legally extracted and exported So each country has to be taken into account and like participate and cooperate. And also between country A and country B, we found some loopholes and some problems in between in which there is no data of where it goes in between, and then they do the timber, they convert it to wood products, and then they export it, for example, to the European Union. So therefore, we want to introduce this system for all the countries in between. And, well, I'm just going to skip this. So yeah, that's our policy, and illegal logging, just to mention it again, its main causes of climate change, biodiversity loss, and with this policy we want to promote youth action, but also global cooperation and multilateralism, and poverty alleviation in all of these communities that suffer from it. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Team 2, for the creative action model.
Then next, let's hear the presentation from Team 3. They will present on the topic of emerging deforestation technologies. Team 3 presenter Angela EUMSEONG, please come to the stage.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela and I'm so excited to present on behalf of Team 3 emerging climate technologies and how they can be best applied in East Asia and North America, where our teams are mostly based. And as I can speak on behalf of the team, we're incredibly grateful to have all of you here listening to youth voices. So in Team 3, we noticed that many companies have afforestation pledges in place. Take Amazon, which promised to plant over 22 million trees. So with these pledges, we would think that deforestation should not be the issue it is. However, it's still happening, and that's because companies often don't consider all of these complex elements in the planting of the trees. This means that saplings often die before they can sequester carbon into the atmosphere. It means that biodiversity is lost when you introduce invasive species into environments. You're not only being ineffective, but actively counterproductive to the measures that we're hoping to address. This is where we come in. Team 3 has researched in places like the United States, where Amazon is based, but also in places like South Korea, and we hope to expand, on the best areas to plant in. We take advantage of cutting-edge satellite technology and open source information to highlight where these places are. But we don't think that's enough. We think that countries need to also make sure that whenever they're allowing these companies to plant in these regions, that they're engaging local stakeholders. This looks like having youth have a voice and sharing their forestry knowledge for a grassroots and top-down approach to make our mission the most effective it can be. We also have petitions so that youth who are not in this region can also elevate their voice and put pressure on corporations. We're leveraging the power of numbers, the power of purchasing parity of these youth consumers. And lastly, we have annual reports collected on our website that will discuss how these companies have been performing over time to compare them to their respective goals. With all of this in mind, we think that our three roles are interplaying in a multidimensional problem to create a multifaceted solution. But that's not enough for us either. In our next steps post-GYCC, we're introducing startups into the game and trying to see how they can best use emerging climate technologies like blockchain, like tagging, to make sure that we're following along with these pledges and how they've been implemented. We'd also love your support in ensuring that we're collaborating with companies who can have the biggest impact that they have possible. We know Korea has even pledged 3 billion trees, and we would love to help engage there too. In conclusion, we think that corporations often use reforestation as a mechanism for greenwashing, but instead it has humongous potential to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. At Team 3, we hope to tap into that potential to maximize the impact of these pledges that are already being implemented. Thank you so much. We look forward to your feedback.
Thank you for introducing your innovative action model, Team 3.
Next, we will hear from Team 4 on their presentation on the topic desertification. Team 4 presenter Ga-eun Jin, please come to the stage.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests and fellow participants. This is Team 4's presentation with the subtopic of rapid and damaging desertification in Africa. We have so many root causes. Root causes would be the reckless expansion, intensive use of agricultural lands, and the rapid urbanization and farming. Those issues cause many negative effects. Firstly, increase the occurrence of drought and famine by the lacking of the water and vegetation. Next, it causes floods during heavy rainfall due to the lack of trees that protect soil since desertification has arose. Other than these two effects, loss of diversity, overpopulation, poor water quality are also the negative effects caused by the deforestation. We have three main goals for the solution. First is restoration. Extensive use of chemical pesticides is degrading the soil quality to soil restoration. So we thought the soil restoration will help to prevent desertification a lot. Next is promoting the use of renewable energy instead of the firewood. Lastly, we will raise awareness about deforestation through the educational campaigns. In the perspective of restoration and renewable energy, we will focus on farmers in rural areas. For educational approach, we will reach out to youth initiatives and environmental NGOs. Next is raising awareness through the education. For the education for farmers, we will explain the prototype of building an educational site for farmers, where the biogas toilet will be set up and will work as GYC's homestead as well. Biogas toilet waste will go to the biogas digester and it will turn into methane and ammonia, which will help fertilizing the soils. This shows how biogas generator will work well. For raising youth awareness of desertification, firstly, we will create national informal educational initiatives to raise awareness in terms of restoration by reaching out to environmental youth-led organizations and launching a campaign focusing on youth to foster the knowledge about desertification-related topics. Next, we will link students with international environmental organizations or platforms in terms of deforestation by connecting them to GYCC-affiliated environmental initiatives as a global incubators, so it can help youth to contribute GYCC action models continuously. Thirdly, we will create a network of climate activists of youth from different countries for further environmental collaboration. GYCC might can create community server for global youth climate activists and share environmental insights and campaigns that are going on together, so the potential campaigns can go on. Lastly, we will ask government to hold youth environmental exchange program so it can help youth to understand about diverse countries' environmental status focusing on the desertification and deforestation. So this is why we thought about it. So this is an existing program. It's like sharing the culture thingy with another country's students. So we thought it'd be great to merge this event and making it to the real environmental exchange program. So we will ask Korean Youth Work Agency to collab with this project, and we can get enough budget and get a better promoting while we are holding this environmental exchange program. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Team 4, for presenting your solution to such an important issue.
Now it's time to hear the presentation from Team 5. They will present on the topic of biodiversity in the forest. Team 5 presenter, Sotinia Puspa-Lestari, please come up to the stage.
안녕하세요. Group 5, the Groovy Guardians, will take you through the impact of deforestation on biodiversity and how we can, as Groovy Guardians, protect it. Why? Because deforestation and diversity is heavily intertwined, especially in Southeast Asia and Oceania region. Coastal forests and mangrove forests are unique wetland ecosystem that cover close to 140,000 kilometers squares and contributed in 118 countries along the equator. In Indonesia alone, the mangrove biodiversity represents around 22.6% of the world's total mangrove ecosystem. Mangrove enhances fisheries by providing habitat for young fishes and stores substantially higher carbon densities. It's even 4 times bigger than the terrestrial forest. And this is crucial for climate change mitigation as the global temperature continues to rise. And furthermore, it offers coastal protections against storms and floods, as well as erosion and sea level rise, which happens more commonly and frequently due to the climate change. But the lack of awareness and understanding of mangrove forests drives decisions and actions by governments, corporations, and coastal communities differently. The lack of resources prevents the coastal communities from maintaining the health of the mangroves ecosystem. On the other hand, governments and corporations would choose short-term gains as agriculture, aquaculture, which further aggravates deforestation. To tackle the issues, we will target 3 main stakeholders: public and local communities, the private sectors, and also the government. The short-term goal of our action plan is to educate more public for them to understand the importance of it in their daily lives. And the public are also encouraged to engage and support the local government to implement sustainable policies for the longevity of the mangroves. Our action model proposes an informative but fun quiz about mangrove ecosystem, services to engage and contributes towards mangrove conservations. And the participants' awareness score will be visualized by the age of mangroves or groovies, in which we recommend relevant actions to prevent further biodiversity loss. And for each quiz response, we will plant 1 mangrove trees in selected local coastal communities, which are our community partners. In promoting the quiz, we will engage with local environmental activists and influencers to gather the desired responses and promote this quiz. And we hope that Mr. Ban Ki-moon and all of the distinguished ladies and gentlemen also join the quiz afterwards. Our main desired outcomes is to plant 500 mangroves, tree gathered. From the dataset gathered, an evaluation report will be produced to inform the design and the mangrove replenishment program with local coastal communities. In order to achieve this, we plan to obtain funding from at least 1 private corporations or CSOs to fund this pilot initiative. The pilot project report, which includes data from monitoring and evaluation, shall become a reference and solid proof for investment verifications. We hope that as the platform grows, we can engage with private sectors and obtain feedbacks and insights for further policies to protect our forests. And in longer term, we hope to include other forest ecosystem to be included in our platform so that to reach biodiversity is protected. That's all from Group 5. We're happy if together we can save our groovies by being the Groovy Guardians, and please support and join our quiz. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you for the meaningful presentation, Team 5.
Lastly, we will hear from Team 6 on their presentation on the topic water quality. Team 6 presenter Leahy Park, please come to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, Team 6 will be presenting an action model concerning deforestation and water security. We share ecosystem services and the consequences of not taking care of our resources. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, and the cultural value of nature for various communities is being lost due to anthropic interventions. The impact of pollution and degradation of watersheds will lead to loss of forests and riparian vegetation. This will then affect, in the short run, drinking water, and in the long run, biodiversity and climate change, climate crisis, and even human rights. The specific problem we wish to address is the politics and lack of awareness concerning deforestation, water security, and riparian zones.
So, what is riparian vegetation? It is vegetation that grows in areas adjacent to water courses. These functions as soil and water protection and conservation by providing mechanical support through root systems. It also acts as barrier for highland runoff and filtration. The problem is caused by the spillover effects of adjacent land use activities, such as forestry, mining, agriculture, and road construction, resulting in loosening the roots and soils. The problem is caused by the spillover effects. Our overall goal is to prevent water pollution and the destruction of native riparian vegetation in those zones. We are aware that not everyone knows what riparian vegetation and zones are. We aim to increase awareness of what they are, their importance, and how they add value to the surrounding communities. For our creative solutions, we will first assess the needs of communities through investigation of the local situation concerning the reasons for the degradation of riparian zones in the region, as well as the local culture there. Then, we will develop sustainable plans suitable for each area, taking into account the research of the local culture and the needs. Alongside this, we will provide educational campaigns and resources addressing this issue. For example, we want to see school children going on field trips to certain riparian zones and not only learning about these riparian zones firsthand, but also growing a sentimental connection with them. This is so that the youth will truly understand the need to protect these zones. We hope to see this action model come to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Team 6, for your interesting presentation. So this concludes the action models from all 6 teams. Thank you for the interesting and thought-provoking presentations.
Yes, did everyone enjoy the presentations? Yes, I know I was definitely engaged in each of these action models and how interesting they all were.
Now, we'll have a Q&A session with the youth participants and our distinguished guests. We ask that former Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat, Ms. Oh Bo-chen, and former Korean Ambassador to the UN, Mr. Kim Suk, to take a seat on the stage. Please give a big round of applause.
In preparation of the Q&A session today, we have collected questions from various topics to be asked to our distinguished guests. The first Q&A will be a time for youth to resolve their curiosities with questions prepared beforehand.
Yes, our first question is from Asif Hassan Jashan to the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Shubha Aparanha, I'm from Bangladesh. Thank you for the floor. So, there are countries in this world which are contributing less but suffering more from climate change phenomena. And regarding those countries, I think government initiative will not always be enough to solve the problem entirely. This is where many young people like us are coming in with different ideas like their own NGOs, startups, often not-for-profit models as well to resolve these issues. What do you think will be a sustainable model to ensure funding for all these ideas, especially the ones which will come out of this GYCC event this year? Thank you.
So just to recap the question, it was, what do you think is a sustainable way to facilitate funding for the ideas that come from youth, especially from GYCC?
To address climate phenomena, I think everybody, as I said, everybody, government, and the business communities, every organization should cooperate together. Nobody, no country can address climate change alone. For example, the richest country in the world is United States, second China, but they cannot do themselves alone. All the countries, all the people, business communities, political leaders, they have to work together. Then working together may require clearly technology and most importantly funding. Funding, as you said. The funding is always a problem, always a problem. Then the climate change really affects much, much more these poor countries. Then why then, if we go back to the origins of climate phenomena, that's because of those big and rich countries. For example, China is the #1 greenhouse gas emitting countries. United States #2. They are #1 and #2 rich countries. And then this will affect us, you, and all the countries. For example, any country in Africa, they have done almost nothing. They have contributed almost nothing to current climate phenomena. So it's totally unfair, in a sense, injustice. So why should we suffer? Why should we suffer when we have not done much to the climate phenomena? Then it's big countries like Europeans and Americans, and they should pay. That's why during my time, the big countries like the United States, European Union, and Japan, they promised that we will provide every year $100 billion to help those poor countries, developing countries. There are many developing countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, Caribbean countries, and small island developing countries. They have done nothing, almost nothing. But they are being impacted. They don't have any money. They don't have any technology, any tools. So it's unfair. That's why we have been really urging to provide $100 billion. Now, the United Nations has established a Climate Green Fund, GCF, Green Climate Fund, the GCF. It is located in Incheon, Korea. That was established by the United Nations to mobilize money and to help those developing countries. Unfortunately, the countries are not keeping their promises. China has not promised $100 billion because they belong to still, they are not the party of this, like the European Union and America and Japan. They have to provide, then even now I'm really asking them to provide the funding. There are two ways in addressing climate. One is mitigation. Everybody knows now that we have to reduce and we have to mitigate. But when you really adapt to this changing situation, you need the technology and you need the money. So we really try to help countries adapt to this changing situation. I'm currently working as a chairman of the Global Center on Adaptation. Yesterday, I had a long talk with Minister Alok Sharma. You know, he's the chairman of the COP26, a British environment minister. I told him that you have not yet successfully mobilized the money. So why don't you do it again? So to your question, this is very serious issues when big countries are not keeping their promises. Now, this Ukrainian situation is also affecting, unfortunately. So most of the money, urgent money, are now going to Ukrainian people. I think Ukrainian people and government deserve money, support. They should be supported. But the Americans and Europeans, they are cutting climate earmarked budget to Ukraine because they have limited source of money. So what is urgent? They believe that there's Ukrainian situation. But what is more urgent is, in fact, climate change issues. So they have, problem is that they have some short-sightedness. I'll stop here, but there are so many things to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your informative response. Next question is from Swetinia Puspa Lestari to the former Korean ambassador to the UN, Mr. Kim Suk.
Selamat sore, I'm from Indonesia. Mr. Kim Suk, earlier the opening speech, all of the leaders asked us as youth to challenge the government and then to private sectors to do more, right? But for us to be heard, to speak louder, we need to be facilitated. And my question will be, do you think that making a youth task force in every country, in every aspect of climate change challenges will be efficient or will be needed to facilitate that conference and that conversations to go? And do you think that GYCC or United Nations can help that task force in every country? Thank you.
Thank you. You're from Indonesia. Last March, I accompanied the Secretary General Pan to Indonesia to attend a meeting of Asian Water Conference. This is all related. Forestation, reforestation, water are all related. Before I answer your question, I'd like to take one moment to respond or give my impression on the 6 presentation that you have just made. 2. One, the first one is that, well, 5 of 6 presenters are female. While I appreciate the women empowerment in this area of special concern on forestation and environment, well, I urge boys to come forward and be more active. And second, out of 6 presentations, all were very excellent ones, identifying problems and also give some kind of answers to that problems. But I thought that some of your teams may consider the root cause of deforestation and address how to remove this root cause, meaning that can we make the world, can we transform this world in less in demand of trees, so that we can no longer worry about large-scale loggings at all. I hope some of you may consider in your further discussion about that. Regarding, yes, your question, the youth, how did you say that? The connecting youth. this is one form of youth activity. You're engaging in this environment, SDGs, and deforestation. Well, as Secretary General has said in his keynote speech, act, come forward, and act as an agent or driver to urge the political leaders and raise consciousness and raise public opinion. That is the mission that the current young generations are facing now. You are going to, sooner or later, you are going to take up the world, the society. So prepare yourself from now on and learn more about the current issues so that when time comes up, then you will be armed to handle the society with the rightful ownership of the world and the society. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful response. The last question is from Lau Rachel to the Secretary General of the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat, Ms. Aw Boon Chan.
Hi, I'm Rachel from Singapore. Our question for Ms. Aw Boon Chan would be, how effective are international agreements to drive climate action, and how do we hold these countries accountable for their goals? Thank you.
Yeah, international agreement, how could it come into effect? Each country must be accountable for this. And frankly speaking, and I do not believe the international community had that kind of a legal abidement to ask every country to practice their promise in terms of international agreement. But since it is an international agreement that represents a kind of a country credibility, and I believe each country who is really responsible for the world, for the global affairs, for international relations, for international affairs, and also particularly for those challenges which that each one only single country cannot address. And I think the country's credibility matters. And that will be the government will be abide by this kind of credibility, country credibility. And I don't think any country in the world would like to see their own countries losing their credibility in international affairs. And that will be one element. And I'm thinking about the domestic driving forces in each country. And I think business sector may give some incentives for their government to keep their promise. One reason is that whenever we have some initiatives, agreements, or challenges we have, as I mentioned, that we may have our opportunities as well. And I give you a story that TCS, we co-organized a seminar with UNESCO concerning the carbon neutrality in CJK countries and ASEAN countries as well. And we're trying to approach two different business sectors and to see whether they would like to join us for that seminar. And some of the business sectors are much more reluctant because they are more closely related to the traditional energy. But for some of the business sectors are much more active and volunteers sometimes because they are closely related to new energy. So in the areas like the climate change and our carbon neutrality goals, and some of the business sectors are also the driving forces behind their government. And apart from that, I think one reason I'm coming here to join Mr. Ban Ki-moon and Ambassador King and trying to encourage the young people and to raise your voice and to encourage your government to keep their promise. And that's concerning not only the country's credibility, but also our future, the future of our planet, and the future in your hands, in our hands, in everybody's hands. So I think that will be the way that we shall encourage all the governments to keep their accountability. Thank you.
A big thank you to our distinguished guests. Next, we have prepared a Q&A board full of questions from the GYCC Global Youth participants. Yeah, so we have a lot of questions here. And the first question goes to Mr. Pan Ki-moon. And I'll read it. What inspired you to care about climate change?
That's a very interesting question. As you know, I started my career as a diplomat. But before that, when I was very young, a high school student, I was invited to the United States. That was 1962. What were you doing in 1962? I was a senior at high school, and I was lucky enough to be invited to the White House and met President Kennedy. At that time, what he said that we should be ready to extend the helping hand. That was sort of a compassion. Most of you may have your heart may be full of passion, but there are not many people with compassion. Then this kind of occasion just inspired me to become a global citizen. That's why I chose to become a diplomat. Then, as I grew up in diplomatic bureaucracies, and then I realized that climate change was becoming more and more serious. But as a Korean diplomat, there was nothing which I could do. When I became Secretary General, by that time, there was what is known as Kyoto Protocol. But China, Korea, and India, they were not bound by Kyoto Protocol. This was for the developed countries, big countries, like the United States, Japan, Canada, United Kingdom, European Union, etc. When China, Korea, and all the developing countries were not bound by this protocol was almost useless. Climate change does not discriminate, does not care where you are coming from. It affects all of us. I thought that there should be some agreement which covers everybody. That's why I first started to talk with the American government, the President Bush, Republican. Republican has some different political stance. President Trump, he was against the climate change. When Paris climate change was agreed upon, he withdrew from this Paris climate change agreement. That was the most irresponsible action by the United States president. Fortunately, President Biden rejoined. In any way, I worked very hard. First, trying to convince the United States. Then second, going to President Hu Jintao and President Xi Jinping. President Xi Jinping and President Obama worked very harmoniously, very harmoniously. They both understood if US and China do not cooperate each other, there will be no hope for humanity. Only China and United States working together, it was possible. And then it was signed by 195 state parties in Paris in December 2015. That was almost 1 year before my retirement. Had we not have that agreement, I think we would really be in a real trouble. I am really proud that during my time, this global agreement was adopted and became effective by 2016. But agreement itself is not that important. Importance is implementation. But when it comes to implementation, there are a lot of different levels of capacity. Of course, US, Korea, Japan, China, United Kingdom, European Union, they have a much more money, technologies, they can do it. But there are many developing countries. I see quite a number of people coming from developing countries where climate change does not care where you are coming from, Japan, Nepal, China, Korea. We are all same human being. We are just living on a small Earth, planet Earth. That's why all of us have to work together. That has been my message. So, as Ambassador Albert Chan also said, and I also did, I think you should speak up. You should speak up. Go to your mayor, go to your governors and ministers. Minister, why don't you do that? Governor, why you are not doing this one? Please do, raise it. You will see this young girl, Greta Thunberg, a Swedish young girl. She's been speaking out. I saw her, I met her in 2019 in September at the United Nations. Many heads of state and prime minister, president, ministers were sitting like this. And she was sitting like here. She was speaking out. What she said, "You have taken away my dreams. I will not forgive you." She was brave. How come she was saying that way to the president and prime ministers? Everybody was silent because she was speaking out. I hope you do the same things. You do the same thing to your president, to your prime ministers and mayor. Normally, political leaders are not much respected here and there, everywhere. Political leaders, but they are the people with the power. They are the people who can mobilize money. They are the people who can mobilize the business people too. So it's very important that political leaders should lead by example. Then I think you have a voting right. Tell them that I'm not going to vote for you if you don't act climate action. I'm not, asking you to sabotage or something, but you have the right. At the same time, you have the duty to make this world sustainable in terms of climate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your inspirational message. That was very loud and clear for all of us, and we hope that you will continue raising your voices. Next question.
Yeah, so here's another question to Mr. Kim Suk. What was your most memorable experience at the UN?
I guess who asked that question? Well, this is to me, unfair question because it is very easy question for the questioner, but it is very tricky to answer because I have served as the ambassador for 2.5 years, and every moment was memorable, except time of sleeping. So picking up one thing is very difficult, but if you insist, then I would pick up one moment in June of 2012 in Rio. That was the 20th anniversary of adopting the declaration in Rio in 1992, so-called Rio Environmental Summit. And that in 2012, we called it Rio Plus 20. In official name, it was UN Sustainable Development Conference. And I happened to be taking part as the co-chair of the preparatory meeting for about a year, and we have met myriads of times for preparation. Sometimes it was a small group of committee members. Sometimes it was a full-fledged meeting among 193 member states. And we have come up with a draft resolution that will be presented in Rio in June, so that the official delegations from all around the world can sit down together to review the draft resolution, and they refine those contents. And I feel proud that I was part of that in making some preparation. I was close. I was under close guidance by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Even though I'm not a UN person, I was representing my own country at the United Nations. But well, until I arrived in New York, I had very little knowledge about this kind of the climate change, SDGs, and something like that. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the Secretariat. I learned a lot from the experts working closely under Secretary General. And the Secretary General was very generous in giving me a very precious guide. That was the moment. And I have one suggestion for you. Some time ago, I met young people like you, and I said that you all know BTS. You know BTS, right? Yeah. And the fan club, name of the fan club was what? Army. Yes. Well, fan club, you are the army of defending the earth and its biodiversity. So I call you Army. But if I analyze Army, A-R-M-Y, in 4 letters, I suggest you to do 4 things to be a rightful army to preserve the earth and biodiversity. First, A, act. Yeah. Make as much action as possible to make others act. He just said, urge, challenge your mayor, your governor. That is the biggest part of act. And second, R, read. Yeah. To try to find out the problems and come up with answers, solutions. Then you have to read first. You have to read books, newspapers, and treatises and essays. That is very important. I miss my youngster time. I lack much of reading, but I see, analyzing from your presentation, many of you are in deep stage of reading, and to be a specialist, you must read a lot. Third, M. Just reading is not enough. You have to get something out of the reading. So meditate. It does not require further explanation. Read and meditate is very important for your job to do for the future. And lastly, this is rather philosophical, yearn. You're still young and you have many things to yearn about. You have the clear purpose and objective in your lifetime. And this one, Global Youth Climate Challenges, focusing on deforestation today, theme of the day, is very important. Yearn for something to realize your purpose in life. That's my take.
Thank you for that amazing response, and that acronym will stick for a long time. Now, next question.
Yeah, so the third question goes to Ms. Albu Chan. What is TCS climate action? TCS is Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat.
I'm really very much looking forward to what the question will be put on me. So TCS action on climate change. First of all, it's a very brief introduction of TCS. We call TCS a Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat. I mean, every country can call trilateral, but this is trilateral. It's among China, Japan, and Republic of Korea. Because this trilateral cooperation started in 1999 when we are confronting the Asian financial crisis. I believe some of you were already born. And then it was actually strengthened in 2008, and that was another financial crisis. That's the world financial crisis. So you can see that the trilateral cooperation actually was born and strengthened whenever there is a crisis and challenges. And the same, currently, climate change is another challenge. It's not a challenge enforcing in the three countries in CJK, but also globally. So this is climate change. It's global wide. And of course, the major economic powers like China is number 2, Japan is number 3, and Korea is number 10. So we say 3 among the top 10 economies in the world. The 3 countries, we must do something. And that is our responsibility. So of course, the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat would also get ourselves involved deeply in all those actions, confronting our challenges, tackling the challenges of climate change. Of course, we're trying to encourage the 3 governments to abide by their responsibilities through the channel of ministerial level consultations and cooperations. So we have trilateral ministers meeting concerning environmental protection, water resources, forestry, agriculture, everything concerning Sustainable Development Goals and also climate change. And we are so happy to see that all the three governments are taking their responsibility and committed to realize, to achieve carbon neutrality. Japan and Korea in 2050, China 2060. I must admit that China is the #1 emission in the world, but I'm sorry to say it's still a developing country. It's large, it's very complicated. It's a not easy task for China to achieve carbon neutrality at 2060, but it's working very hard. So we're trying to encourage the three governments to commit their promises, their commitment. And that will be the one action that TCS is taking now. And the second action, actually, we are trying to cooperate with academia, with think tanks, with public sectors, and also business sectors as well, and try to have some discussions on how that we could give powers to not only the government, but business and public sectors to work together to achieve this goal. So we are going to have our next carbon neutrality seminar in October, together co-organized with UNESCO. And of course, we are having more actions, of course. And the third action we are taking actually is for kind of working with civil society. For instance, in August, in the coming August, we are going to organize a program concerning the teachers' education concerning environmental protection and carbon neutrality. And this project was strongly supported by the three governments. So we'll try to invite some of the teachers from the three countries and give some, share with them some knowledge concerning climate change and environmental protection, so that we then return to their own position as a teacher, and they could have more influence on their students, the young people like you, so that the voice could be raised, the awareness could be promoted, and more people could be invited to join our actions in the three countries concerning climate change. And we also have projects among the youth, the young people. As I mentioned, we have 8 youth projects. And actually, in each one of the youth projects, we will focusing on the climate change, have some discussions, workshops among the young people. And in particular, we have a project concerning students, primary students. It's also a project supported by the three governments. We invite some of the primary school students to join us to share their experience and to promote their awareness concerning climate change and environment protection. And that will be some of the actions that I can list it out for TCS. Thank you.
Thank you. So she outlined 3 different actions, and that was very informative as well.
Yeah, so maybe this would be our last question to Mr. Ban Ki-moon. How to inspire youth to get out of your comfort zone and embrace the fight against climate change?
I think we have already discussed this matter, how to fight climate change. It's not only the government. I think each and every one of you should change your life pattern, living style. It's not only a big technological or big financial issues. Even small thing, even from a small thing, you can change. You can change. First of all, use less. Whatever you may have in your life. For example, just a simple writing papers. Try to use both sides and try to use sparingly. Water. So some people just try to open this valve all the time. Water is running. Water is very spacious. I think the most precious thing is water in our life. Even a single drop of water will be very precious. I'll give you one very interesting example to just educate the leaders, like President Obama, President Hollande of France, or like President Xi Jinping, or all these big shots. I convened the summit meeting at the United Nations. There were a lot of leaders. Do you know what I did, what I treat them for their lunch? You may expect that President Obama or Hollande or President Xi Jinping, they would be treated with the best quality food. I didn't, but they didn't know what I treat. Do you know landfill, landfill food? Whatever has been used at the very prestigious restaurant, there are something which has been spent over. Yeah. Like a cabbage, most of the best portion had already been eaten by the customers. Then there will be some waste over. I asked the former chef to President Obama at the White House. He had one restaurant, so we negotiated with him. Can you make a sort of a landfill, like a small fish dish? Whatever nice real portion of beef steak, I think the real portion has already been eaten by other guests. And they were all used something which had been almost to be discarded. So we brought them, and he made a nice lunch. These people didn't know what they were eating. This is the way. Later, I talked to them after they have all eaten, enjoyed at the United Nations, believing that this is the best quality, best delicious food. After that, well, Excellencies, you have just eaten something which are left over. The most important, precious, delicious food have been eaten by some other guest, but you are eating. My message is that please use less, care more. Use less and care more for our future. If any one of you would have a stomach trouble, United Nations will be responsible. How nice. They all laughed. Nobody expressed anger. Why did you treat me like this way? Nobody. They were all applauding. And I went to press room. Look, I have treated them with all this spent over waste food. In 2015, there was Expo in Milano. I went there as a Secretary General. The World Food Program, WFP, had their one pavilion there. What they had displayed were all the waste, Coca-Cola bottles, or whatever waste that you must be, seeing on the street side. they were really trying to show the big, shocking, message to the people who were visiting this expo. This is my message. Though even one electric bulb, just try to use less. Otherwise, this will all cause you spend more money. This will come from your own pocket to pay taxes to the government. This will help addressing climate change issues. Now, many scholars now trying to reuse this rainwater. China has established some cities like sponge cities. We had the heavy rain yesterday. Suppose in some cities in China, not all, the park would be somewhere, would be not flat, but it would be like this way, and they will make some big hole there so that all this rainwater will be gathered together. If you go to a hotel, what we say is runoff water. You just take shower all the times. But please, try to use less water while taking bath, shower. This water always run off. Then that's all. That's wasted. We have to have some wisdom to use all this wastewater, runoff water. This is what China is now doing in some of the cities. This is a part of some adaptation. How to adapt to changing climate crisis. So my message is very simple: use less, care more about climate change. Then you will be able to change your behavioral pattern from your office, from your home. So do exactly what I say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our distinguished guests have spoken on all the questions that we've asked, and thank you for your thoughtful responses.
Now we'll have our gifting ceremony from the Global Youth participants to the former UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon. For this gifting ceremony, the GYCC Youth Lab co-leader Leon will deliver the gift on behalf of all the Global Youth Climate Challenges youth participants. We'll now invite former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to the stage. This photo frame has been prepared that contains participants pausing in front of their country's native forests with written messages that represent youth voices. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Also the slogan, our slogan, Unite Youth for a Greener Tomorrow.